A friend of mine who's seriously overweight, he called me up. He said, President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88, and in New York, I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on?
Well, we all know that President Trump is not politically correct, but he's actually trying to make a serious point there. Drugs, including weight loss drugs, are far more expensive in America than, say, in Europe. And as of this week, he is telling Big Pharma to slash prices for Americans. Now, that's surely a good thing, and yet, as ever with Trump, it's debatable.
It's a huge move toward breaking up the pharmaceutical company cartels.
No one has been able to do this before.
It's not going to work. He really doesn't have the legal authority to do this.
Well, before we talk to our guest, let's look at the reaction to Trump's war on drug prices.
The president signing an executive order just a few hours ago aimed at lowering prescription drug costs in America.
He's setting a 30-day deadline for companies to lower the cost of prescription drugs.
This is the most powerful executive order on pharmacy pricing and healthcare ever in the history of our nation.
I never thought that this would happen in my lifetime.
Americans who have struggled to pay more than the rest of the world for drugs are cheering today.
We do have the highest drug prices in the world. Drug companies in the U.S. have basically had free reign to charge whatever they want.
We are subsidizing socialized medicine in Europe.
Most pharmaceutical companies understand that this is not really right for America to have to generate 70% of their profits, and we're only 4% of the world population.
He would like to see European countries pay higher prices for their medicine.
Where we're all going to pay the same. We're going to pay what Europe's going to pay.
My top line reaction is that this is probably fake, an attempt to generate positive headlines. He did almost the exact same executive order in his first term, and it got immediately blocked by multiple courts.
In the executive order, did he specify which drugs, and did he specify what rulemaking authorities or rules they might issue?
No, and no.
We're generally of the view that the policy as it stands, there's really not much in the EO actually when it comes to substantive policy.
How soon will this happen? It depends on how enthusiastically the drug companies cooperate.
Drug companies are not stupid. This was announced and all of their stocks went up 5 or 6% today. Why? Because they know that there are ways of getting around this.
I brought it up with the drug companies, represented by somebody who's very, very smart. He just said, look, you got me. You got me.
Well, is President Trump really trying to help ordinary Americans? Let's ask our panel, and for the sake of simplicity, the gentleman on the left here, Dr. Georges Benjamin. He's the executive director of the American Public Health Association. He's very skeptical about President Donald Trump's plan. And the other two, well, we have Sofia Karstens, the founder of Decentralize America PAC, and Dr. Philip Ovadia. They are both in favor of it. They've warmly received the plan. So let's have a chat first with Dr. Philip Ovadia, a heart surgeon. What will this executive order mean for Americans now?
Yeah, I'm real excited about the intent behind this order. What it shows to me is that President Trump, Bobby Kennedy, and the administration are willing to tackle the big challenges when it comes to our healthcare system. They're willing to take on the pharmaceutical industry, which has too much influence on the healthcare system here in America these days, too much influence on the physicians, on the patients, are not afraid to challenge the pharmaceutical industry and to start looking at the ways that the pharmaceutical industry is influencing our healthcare system, and I would say negatively influencing the health of the people of America.
Sofia Karstens, what's your take on it?
I feel strongly that this executive order is a big step towards Bobby Kennedy's ultimate goal of unraveling the regulatory capture and corruption that exists at all levels of our government. It's a huge move toward market competition and breaking up the pharmaceutical company cartels. They have been overcharging at the expense of the taxpayers for decades. No one has had the courage to do this. The patents are one of the biggest components of this because it's allowed them to establish an industrial monopoly in theory, we have antitrust laws in this country, but after the Bayh-Dole Act in 1980, those patents could now be shared with the agencies. So, for example, what we've had is NIH sharing patents with private producers along with employees and funding. So taxpayers are funding R&D for the drugs, and they're often buying the drugs, and they're funding Medicare and Medicaid, who are the largest consumers for the drugs and customers of the drugs. So it's truly been a closed loop revolving door, all funded by the taxpayers. And if you look at other countries, they just charge normal market prices, which can be 1/10 of the cost in the US. Well, Americans are paying monopoly prices, which ultimately means the result is that the American taxpayers have been subsidizing healthcare for other countries.
Right. Well, Dr. Benjamin, the first two contributors, very happy that some change is coming as a result of this executive order. What's your take?
Yeah, let me start by applauding the president for wanting to do this. This is a very, very important thing. No doubt that our drugs cost too much. The problem with this current executive order is that it's kind of like his tariffs. He's simply demanding that they do it and hoping they'll bring those prices down. He really doesn't have the legal authority to do this. An earlier executive order where he wants to have Medicare and other federal organizations negotiate for prescription drugs is much more likely to achieve the goal that he's trying to reach. But simply telling the drug companies to bring the price down is not going to work.
Dr. Ovadia, I started actually with asking, what will it mean for ordinary Americans now? And I mentioned that because quite a few commentators who are in favor of President Trump have said that means that people buying medicines, as of right now, will be able to buy them at a vastly reduced price. Is that true, or is that an exaggeration?
Yeah, I think that is an exaggeration. I certainly share Dr. Benjamin's concerns about the actual putting this into practice. But, you know, we've seen the way that President Trump works, right? The art of the deal. He's going to propose this, what seems like a pretty extreme maneuver, and then start to negotiate. And we've seen this recently with the tariffs, for instance, how they've already started to negotiate and get what look like favorable deals from these other countries because of the threat of the massive action being taken. And like I said, what I am most optimistic about is it shows President Trump's willingness to take on the pharmaceutical industry. And as Sofia said earlier, no one has been able to do this before. I do worry about what the implementation will actually look like, what it will take to get there.
Yeah.
But I'm optimistic that this is going to lead to meaningful change for the American people.
Well, let's pick up on that point, Sofia. You know, the previous plan by Trump in his first term was blocked by multiple courts. What makes you think it will be any different this time?
Right. So the pharma lobby has always been able to block changes based on the assertion that we have a free market in this country and that these are free market prices. But as I just described, it's anything but. They and the establishment argue that this is price control, but that's looking at it through the looking glass because it's actually creating an internationally competitive market price. So I feel strongly that this, your colleagues are correct. You know, this is throwing a wrench into a global, massive, powerful macroeconomic machine on behalf of the American people. There's certainly going to be some readjustment that's going to happen, and I'm not saying this is a straight line. There's going to be some cleanup that's going to be necessary, but I think shaking stuff up in this way is the only way that we are going to break the stranglehold of the pharmaceutical cartels and the racketeering that has been going on for decades.
Dr. Jayasree Benjamin, you've just heard Sofia describe them as cartels and racketeering, somewhat akin to the mafia. And we know from listening to the press conference that the pharmaceutical industry does have at least one, perhaps two lobbyists for every congressperson. So how would you describe the industry?
Look, like many Americans, people all over the world, I use their product. So I think the pharmaceutical industry provides a useful public service for all of us. But let me correct one thing. Certainly the Trump administration in his first term made some efforts to try to reduce prescription drugs, but it was actually the Biden administration that finally got the first effort to negotiate Medicare for prescription drugs. And of course, the Trump administration should build upon that in a much more aggressive way. But also to point out the fact that all those other countries, they actually do price fix. They negotiate prices to some degree, but they actually fix the price that they're going to pay because they have universal health care and they can do that. So, you know, all this stuff about price fixing and this fixing, we ought to get over that. The fact is the drugs cost too much. We have some legal mechanisms in which we can negotiate if we use them. And I would hope that the Trump administration, in an accelerated manner, will use all of its government clout to get those prices down because we're one of the biggest payers for drugs in our country.
Yes, well, Trump has said in his executive order that he is planning to use his various secretaries of state, if you like, you know, of the commerce and trade and of health to get the best possible deals. Can we just take a listen to more of the joke that we played for you, the Trump joke that we played for you at the beginning, because there's a very serious point to be had there. So let's have a listen to that.
I mean, I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine who's a businessman, very, very, very top guy. Most of you would have heard of him. A highly neurotic, brilliant businessman, seriously overweight, and he takes the fat shot drug. And he called me up, and he said, President, he calls me, he used to call me Donald, now he calls me President, so that's nice respect. But he's a rough guy, smart guy, very successful, very rich. I wouldn't even know how we would know this, but because he's got comments. President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88. And in New York, I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on? He said, so I checked. And it's the same box, made in the same plant, by the same company. It's the identical pill that I buy in New York. And here I'm paying $88 in London. In New York, I'm paying $1,300. Now, this is a great businessman, but he's not familiar with this crazy situation that we have. But he was stunned.
Dr. Philip Ovadia, so Trump being Trump there, but he does make a serious point. An American traveling in London will find the exact same medication at an absolute tiny fraction of the amount that he's paying back home. And can I ask, are those sort of examples, are they based in fact?
Yeah, as far as I know, they are largely based in fact, and we do have these massive price differences. You don't even have to travel to London. For many Americans, it's just a matter of going across the border to Canada or Mexico, and you can get many of these pharmaceuticals at a much lower price. Now, one thing that I would love to bring into the discussion is that there is something that the American people can do today to improve their situation, and that is reduce your reliance on pharmaceuticals. Take those diet and lifestyle measures that can actually make you healthier. And then you won't need the pharmaceuticals and it won't matter what it costs. And this is really what's at the heart of the Make America Healthy Again movement. And I want to see more of that emphasis. Attacking drug prices is great, it's necessary, but it's not enough. Let's reduce our dependence on these pharmaceuticals by truly making ourselves healthy again.
And that starts upchain in people's behavior, if you like. You know, it starts with the diet, for example.
Yes, I think that the diet and the other lifestyle factors, you know, your activity levels, your exercise, your sleep, all of that can go a very long way in reducing your need for the pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. The average list price for a vial of insulin in the United States is $98.70, and in Germany, the same product, about $11. Sophia, of course, for quite a long time, the pharmaceutical industry has argued that it needs to make big profits in order to fund research and development, R&D. Otherwise, we're not going to get these modern, up-to-date and effective medicines.
Oh, historically, we have, as I said at the beginning of the program, been funding these these pharmaceutical R&D and everything else for these pharmaceuticals. What that means is that we have essentially been funding everything up until a certain point, and then these nations are able to take advantage of the fact that we have already done that research, and that we have already created the platform for these products. So we've funded everything up until this pipeline, and now somebody else comes in and is able to take advantage at a reduced rate that which we have already paid for. And I would also say that the claim that the excess profits are necessary for R&D is also false. On its face, even if that were true, what that means is the American taxpayers and consumers are funding R&D drugs that the rest of the world is getting at a discount. But what that means more importantly is that a lot of these drugs are repurposed drugs. In other words, they're drugs that were developed for one thing and were later discovered to have an application for something else, like the diabetes drugs, for example, that are being used for a secondary purpose like weight loss. That they figured out by accident. That wasn't R&D funded. So all of this money that is going into all of these coffers that we're saying is needed on the backs of the taxpayers, other countries, favored nation status as well, but most countries are not, they do not have the same skin in the game for the entire pipeline of the development of that drug. They're only coming in at the very tail end of that pipeline. And so they're being given a preferred status for the pricing.
Dr. Benjamin, just wrapping up now, if you were an advisor to President Donald Trump, how would you advise him to bring down the prices as you so wish would happen?
My advice to the president would be to first negotiate aggressively around prescription drugs through Medicare, Medicaid, other federal programs. I also agree we need to do PBM reform. It's stuck in Congress. He needs to use his leverage to get that legislation out of Congress. I do think we need to do more research, particularly around orphan drugs, because that's one of the big challenges is trying to get people to invest in those, including vaccine research. And I think that we need to make sure that we expand coverage for everybody, because if we build the market bigger for more people who have eligibility for drugs, not shrink it, that Congress is currently working on doing, you'll have a better product and you have more product to sell.
What about making people healthier so they don't have to rely on the pharmaceutical industry quite as much? Should there be more emphasis on that?
I absolutely agree that it's important for individuals to improve their health, but you also have to make the healthy choice the easy choice. That means making sure we have affordable foods in every community. That means making sure we have enough food for everybody. It also means having sidewalks around so communities can be walkable, bikeable, and green. It means clean air. It means addressing climate change. Tragically, it means doing a lot of the things that the current budget cuts as being proposed are undermining. So I do think we need to have some policy coherence here. And we're obviously trying to encourage the President and Congress to do that.
And what about taming big ag and big food?
Oh, we would eagerly join with Secretary Kennedy to take on big food. But now, if you've seen big tobacco, big food is a bigger giant.
That's great to hear. And I think everyone on the panel can agree with that. Dr. Jayasree Benjamin, Sofia Karstens, and Dr. Philip Ovadia, thank you all very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Well, as we've heard, Trump has put the blame for high drug prices partly on Europe, perhaps even more than the pharmaceutical companies themselves. Here's what he said.
It was really the countries that forced Big Pharma to do things that, frankly, I'm not sure they really felt comfortable doing, but they've gotten away with it, these countries. European Union has been brutal. Well,
I'm joined now by Dr. Jayasree Iyer. She's the CEO of Access to Medicine Foundation, to discuss the effects this could have in Europe and beyond. So, Dr. Iyer, I appreciate that you see there are some merits to this plan, but you're also concerned. Why?
Well, I mean, overall, Americans and lots of people living in countries all around the world indeed pay too much for healthcare. And part of this is the drug prices, but part of this is also healthcare costs, hospital admissions, tests, etc. But there are limited details at the moment on how this is going to be implemented. There's going to be lots of legal and administrative hurdles, and this will have an effect on the industry. Give a few examples. I mean, reference pricing has its problems if the US administration is going to refer to the lowest price across the world. this can lead to launch delays, avoidance of the pharmaceutical industry in investing in low-income countries because manufacturers aim to protect high-income market prices. Countries often have non-comparable baskets of reference countries, so they have different GDPs, different health systems. So at the end, you have very little coordination or real understanding of how to refer to a price in another country itself. Typically, what happens is reference pricing also leads companies to stagger their filings for registration. They start with the highest paying countries and then they work your way down, and this won't change. So what will happen is you end up seeing that companies will, as they aim to protect the high income markets, there will be launch delays and avoidance in a lot of low income markets. And this effect will actually lower the pace of progress in low and middle income countries, where we've already been seeing, as part of our work in the Access to Medicine Index, that the pace of progress has already reduced quite significantly.
I think the Trump administration indicated that the price would be based on a country that has a similar type of economy and GDP.
Yeah, I mean, ideally that should be in place, but then you have to then look at what is the price volume. You have to look at sort of the different health systems needs. You have to look at whether comparator products are actually made available in those markets itself. So on one hand, the plan is well intentioned because it's meant to reduce prices of specific products that are today way too high for health systems and for individual patients to pay for. But on the other hand, the approach that is taken, the way that it's actually going to be implemented, is going to define its success or its failure.
So Trump says that 75% of the big pharmaceutical companies' profits are coming from the United States, which accounts for just 4% of the world's population. And then he goes on to say, extrapolate from that, he needs to equalize. In other words, the other countries, especially Europe, need to start paying more so that the Americans can pay less. So do you anticipate medicines in Europe will increase in price?
Medicines in Europe may increase in price around the whole world for a variety of different reasons, not necessarily because there is going to be a restabilization based on this particular executive order. At the end, it might be increased more because of the tariffs, as obviously the world is very interconnected, and you might need active pharmaceutical ingredients coming from one part of the world in order to make a finished product in another part of the world. A second reason for an increase can also be, especially in product lines where there are fewer and fewer companies who actually produce products, such as antibiotics. So products like that, where when it's going to be still in demand, but not available all around the world, those things may increase in price itself. So you'll end up seeing more of that happening than a particular region or country agreeing to pay more to compensate for another part of the world.
Did you say you were concerned about the impact on research and development? Because one of our other contributors have said that quite often these pharmaceutical companies are getting a free ride in that the existing drugs have been observed to help other conditions, for example, in weight loss or with hair loss, and then they've essentially been repurposed at no extra expense to the big pharma companies.
Yeah. So correct. I mean, so typically the pharmaceutical industry responds in the sense that the more they are able to generate revenues and a higher profit margin, the more they're willing to invest and reinvest in risky areas, right? Which I'm not saying necessarily that this is the right approach, but this has been the approach the pharmaceutical industry has been taken for years to come. So you tend to have most of the pharmaceutical industry going towards blockbuster products, going towards large income, high income markets, going towards markets where they can make more revenues, a higher profit margin, and then deprioritize countries and regions or therapeutic areas where you don't have as much capacity to make the profit margins as usual. So this will have an impact on R&D in the sense that the pharmaceutical industry will continue to investing in areas where they can make the similar profit margins. But we're hoping that some of the companies will actually invest in sort of increasing the volumes. Because the only instrument to influence both the top line and bottom line is to increase the volume of products sold, and in that way still maintain sustainability of the company itself. But it's just rare for that companies will react that way. Yeah.
And just a final question: do you have any concerns about these new blockbuster weight loss drugs that are all the rage nowadays?
Absolutely. So the current innovations in weight loss drugs has been phenomenal, right? So there's some amazing medicines that are out there that can really be useful for people who have clinical obesity problems in all around the world. But what's really happening right now is it has taken a lot of attention, investments, and access away from areas such as in chronic diabetes. We just published a paper yesterday on the need for pediatric populations all around the world, so young people and children who need access to insulin chronically for their lifetime, and how fragile that situation actually is because they're relying on donation programs when actually a lot of the commercial programs are being redirected towards weight loss treatments. So we're going to start seeing a real problem for being able to treat conditions where it's life or death for patients in lieu of obesity, celebrity status of obesity drugs.
But I mean in the actual usage of those drugs, not the knock-on effects of them hogging all the limelight and the money. The usage, are you satisfied that they are completely safe?
Well, I mean, that's I think more in terms of the scientific results that are coming forward. The science has shown that they are generally safe. There are also newer innovations in oral treatments that are coming forward for obesity. So there are a lot of other additional treatments, but it has the bigger problem is going to be the knock-on effects it has on other chronic conditions.
Dr. Jayasree Iyer, thank you so much for your contributions today. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes, do go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Until next week then, goodbye.